Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for joining us. You're watching our weekly program, Talk to OBN, on your favorite media channel, OBN Horn of Africa. In this edition, we'll be talking about Ethiopia's diplomatic engagement and efforts with the rest of the world. To discuss this matter, I am joined by Professor Lawrence Freeman, live from the US. Doctor, thank you for your time.
I'm glad to be with you.
Great. To begin with, access to the sea outlet is one of the burning questions of Ethiopia. How do you see the ongoing diplomatic engagements with neighboring countries to access a seaport?
Thank you. Obviously, this has been a sensitive issue for neighboring countries in the region. And there's a lot of anger left over from many years of colonial policy. The point is that Ethiopia is proceeding, in my understanding, as the Prime Minister Abiy said in March, to peacefully negotiate as an outlet, a port to the Red Sea. This will involve negotiations with Eritrea, Somalia, Somaliland. I think that right now there's a lot of tension between Eritrea and Ethiopia, which I hope is resolved, and both countries go back to the commitment they made in 2018 for economic cooperation. So I think there are negotiations and discussions going on with the neighboring countries, and I think it's in everyone's interest. I mean, the GERD itself is a major development for the region, for integration, and having Ethiopia, which is the largest economy in the region and a growing economy in the region, it's to the advantage of neighboring countries to work out a peaceful resolution to give Ethiopia more access to the trade routes along the Red Sea, the Gulf of Eden, the Indian Ocean. So hopefully everybody sees it's in their self-interest and moves ahead with negotiations between sovereign leaders. And I think that's the appropriate path to take.
Well, Professor, Ethiopia is a landlocked country. Obviously, this landlocked issue has emanated before 2 decades or so. Why Ethiopia remained landlocked? Because it's not in Genesis, this country was not landlocked.
Well, my understanding is that as part of the 1993 agreement for the separation of Eritrea and the independence of Eritrea, the current prime minister at that time, Meles Zenawi, made an agreement as part of the separation to allow the port of Assab to remain in Eritreans' territory. And that's now over 30 years ago. So that was an agreement made by the Ethiopian head of state at that time. Whether it was a wise agreement and what the reasons for the agreement can be debated. But now it is the case that Ethiopia, despite historical references, will have to negotiate with its neighboring countries who are all sovereign, accepted as sovereign, separate nations. So there's no way out, in my mind, unless someone has another alternative, but peaceful, thoughtful negotiations that is built around the concept that is in the interest of each country to collaborate on access to the Red Sea, because this will help build up the economy of the entire region. And the countries involved, Eritrea, Somalia, or Somaliland, will all benefit from the increased economic flow of physical goods passing through those countries in those ports. My basis is always to say, what is the solution? And the solution is countries cooperating together in their self-interest and in the interest of the other. And that's how I see the future of diplomacy pathway has to be followed.
You've been here to Ethiopia lately, and you've done many publications, and you've been interviewed by many places here. Specifically talking about this diplomatic engagement of Ethiopia, how do you see the current gesture of Ethiopia's diplomatic engagement with the rest of the world and the diplomatic policy and foreign policy of Ethiopia as well?
Well, what I was able to do in I spent 2 weeks in Ethiopia from May 12th to May 25th. And this, of course, is not my first trip to Ethiopia. Maybe it's my 12th trip to Ethiopia. And I was able to look at some of the progress that Ethiopia's economy is making. I mean, aside from the very dramatic changes in Addis Ababa, with infrastructure inside the city, paid for by the citizens of Addis Ababa, I was able to visit several manufacturing sites, farms, irrigated farms and non-irrigated farms, a sugar factory, a steel factory, and have meetings with people in the government. So last time I was in Ethiopia was a few years ago, and I see now the progress in emphasis on manufacturing, on agriculture, now bringing irrigation now into agriculture more prominently. This all represents a step forward for Ethiopia, even though there are still problems of poverty and there are still problems with the economy, unemployment, inflation, etc. But Ethiopia is making progress. That's the most important thing. And therefore, they have a lot to share with the rest of Africa, including the fact that in September, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam will be inaugurated. So Ethiopia represents a positive model, if you will, for other countries to consider and cross-reference and exchange ideas on manufacturing and farming and building electrical power. Ethiopia already has a very strong relationship with the BRICS countries, including especially China. And recently, the Prime Minister made a trip to Europe. So I think there's a lot of positive things in the future for Ethiopia if they maintain the path that they're on, which is, as I emphasize, they have to concentrate on infrastructure and manufacturing to become a truly sovereign nation that does not depend on buying products at unfair prices from the rest of the world. So I think that this is a very positive step forward. The inauguration of the GERD in September will be something that all leaders around the world, in Africa, Europe, Asia, and my own United States, should be supporting and attending and visiting the inauguration of the GERD, which I've now visited twice in the last 3 years. I might be the only American who's visited the GERD twice in recent years. But this can become a point of expansion of economic and political diplomacy because it's such an important issue for Ethiopia and really for the African continent. And if other countries in Europe and Africa, Asia, United States are really concerned about Ethiopia and the progress of Africa, then they would support all the efforts that Ethiopia has made in completing the GERD. And I think they started about 13 or 14 years ago. So this is a high point in Ethiopia and the African continent. And other countries should understand that. If they don't understand it, they're not thinking clearly, and I can hopefully educate them to think better.
How about the current US-Ethiopia relationship? How do you see it?
Well, that of course, as everybody knows, is very complicated because the U.S. foreign policy as a whole and its policy towards Africa is dramatically changing under the new administration. So the current policy of the U.S., as articulated by the current leader of the African policy in the State Department, I think his name is Troy Futrell, is they want to focus on economic development, or at least economic transactions, or maybe more bluntly, making money in the deals from Africa. My initial impression is that they're not going to make an issue of so-called human rights issues, which have been wrongly used against Ethiopia and other African nations. They're not going to make an issue of good governance. I don't think they're going to get involved in the various ethnic conflicts in the country, as the Biden administration did. And they're going to focus on economic deals. And if they think they can make money and economic returns from working with Ethiopia, which, as I said, is a growing economy, then I think that's the focus that they're going to have. Potentially, there is a positive way that Ethiopia and the United States can work together. Of course, the United States has cut back all foreign aid, which including the Biden administration removed Ethiopia from AGOA, and the Trump administration, we put more tariffs or economic limitations on African countries. So that forces a new conception of how to work with the United States. And as I say, that's going to be around economic arrangements that yield the United States economic returns, and hopefully will also be in the interest of Ethiopia, as they must insist. This is a great opportunity for what we call the global South, which includes the BRICS as its unofficial leader of the global South. This opens up an opportunity for for an increase in exports, imports, exchange of ideas, and tying the economies closer together. And you can see from visiting the nations that Prime Minister Abiy has visited, this is, of course, part of the process. And my hope is that the BRICS and the Global South, as they become more confident, will emerge as the dominant political players in the world, and we will establish a new set of relationships in the world, a new set of economic relations based on self-interest of development for each nation, and also strategic and military arrangements, which take into account the security needs of all nations. We can force a new paradigm, and I think Ethiopia can play a leading role in this, and that would change all relations, economic, politically, in the world for decades to come if we accomplish this paradigm change.
Great. Let's talk about BRICS. And how do you see the alliance of BRICS nation and their diplomatic engagement with their respective member countries of BRICS domain?
The BRICS, as I said, it has emerged, in my view, as the de facto leadership of the Global South. There are 3 countries in Africa, South Africa, Egypt, and Ethiopia, that are members of the BRICS. And I think unofficially, China is the powerhouse economically. I don't think that's an insult to anyone. It is the strongest economy of the BRICS. So now you have 13 member countries, and there's about 9 or 10 other countries that are partnering with the BRICS, including Nigeria in Africa, the largest population country. So this gives Ethiopia and Africa quite a foothold in the BRICS. And of course, the close relationship between China and Ethiopia is obvious by just going to Ethiopia. So with Ethiopia, the most advanced economy, growing economy in East Africa, it's one of the pillars of the African continent. And as those benefits from Ethiopia spill over into neighboring countries and their relationship with the BRIC members, which is now members and partners, 22 countries, and this offers a great opportunity for a positive political and economic relations. And I'm very optimistic about the BRICS and the Global South this year and the coming years. I mean, South Africa right now is the chairman of the Group of 20, which will then be passed on to the United States, I think, in November of this year. So between now and November, I think a lot of positive developments can occur, which I think Ethiopia will be part of.
Let's talk about Ethiopia's presence in the Horn of Africa. Obviously, Ethiopia is an anchor nation, both politically and economically, in this region. Can you tell us the significance that Ethiopia plays in putting a position in this part of the world?
Well, again, I would start with the accomplishment of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is now near completion and will be inaugurated, as I said, in a couple of months. Ethiopia is already selling power to Djibouti, to Sudan, to Kenya, and I'm told we'll be setting up power lines and selling power to Tanzania before the end of the year. That's already 4 countries that Ethiopia is supplying power to. Ethiopia is also, I'm told, self-sufficient in wheat, and this year their output may come to 30 million metric tons, which means Ethiopia will be selling wheat in the market. And these are just a few of the accomplishments, and all of this will benefit trade and commerce in East Africa. And as you said, Ethiopia is considered to have the 3rd largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, behind Nigeria and South Africa. And so that places Ethiopia role in East Africa and the Horn of Africa as potentially a driver of economic policy for the entire region. And as I said, with Tanzania coming online, it's already supplying power to 4 countries. And I believe 7 or so turbines will be in operation in the next few months, adding potentially 5,150 megawatts of power to Ethiopia's grid. And this could change the political economic activity inside Ethiopia by giving everyone access to electricity, but also helping out its neighbors. So this is, for me, a very exciting time. I'm not saying Ethiopia is a model for other countries, but it has demonstrated through building, financing, and completing the GERD and other accomplishments in agriculture and light industry that other countries can learn and negotiate and establish a close relation with Ethiopia that will be beneficial to everybody.
This African Continental Free Trade Area is one of the Agenda 2063, which is the blueprint of the African Union aspiration. How do you see the diplomatic engagement among nations in the same pipeline of each African regions in executing the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Well, one is I read the African Agenda 2063, has many good ideas in it, but it's not going to work if we have to wait 40 years or 38 years for these ideas to be implemented. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement or area can be very positive because it would open up the entire continent to each country and the members of each country. That is a noble idea, but unless there is infrastructure in Africa, more infrastructure in Africa, I'm afraid both of these goals will not be reached. You can't have free trade in Africa if you can't travel. We don't have trains, high-speed trains connecting all the countries, all the capitals, all the ports. It doesn't exist. In fact, food now, between 30 and 40% of food rots because it can't be properly transported to markets. So we're not going to have a really free trade progress of free trade agreement, which people estimate is in the trillions of dollars. It's not going to happen unless we have a massive infusion of electricity, a massive infusion of development of transcontinental rail. Those two things have to happen much greater than they are now. We need 50 to 100,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. We don't have it. We have some rail in some places, but it's not adequate. It doesn't travel far enough to other countries. Electricity is pathetically small in sub-Saharan Africa, well under 100,000 megawatts for well over 1 billion people. And the GERD adds 5,150 megawatts, which is very good, but we need a lot more. We need a lot more GERDs. We need more nuclear energy plants being built. So without infrastructure, especially electricity and rail, the goals of the African Free Trade Area and 2063 agenda will not really be accomplished. So that's the challenge. Can we build up the infrastructure of Africa? And it's the same internal challenge for Ethiopia and every other country. And that's what we've got to focus on. That's my focus. If we do that, then we can see success in the decades and generations to come. And we can eliminate poverty and eliminate hunger in Africa.
Well, how do you see again the role of Ethiopia in the United Nations and the European Union? How this country is being perceived by European Union and UN in multi-spheres?
I don't know what the relations are in the United Nations and the European Union. I know that Ethiopia has a long history of international relations with the institutions, going all the way back to the Bretton Woods Agreement, which Roosevelt organized. And Ethiopia was the only African country there because they were the only African country that was not colonized. So Ethiopia has a prominent history of working with international institutions. And of course, the African Union is in Addis Ababa, which also gives Ethiopia additional political influence.
Well, Professor, thank you for your expertise and valuable insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk with you.
Well done. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. This brings you to the end of our edition for today. See you next time with another edition.